This is a story about a man who finished last, yet won the hearts of the world. A man who was a genuine spectacle, a glorious failure, and a cultural hero. A man so disruptive, so polarizing, that the Global Olympic Committee had to write a new rule, an unwritten law specifically to keep him out. His name is Michael Edwards. The world knows him as Eddy the Eagle. If you think the Olympics are only about gold medals and world records, you don't understand the true Olympic spirit of participation. And in Calgary 1988 Olympic ski jump, that spirit found its unlikely, awkward, and undeniably charming mascot in a plasterer from Cheltenham, England. For a time, Michael Edwards' underdog story became bigger than the games themselves. The question isn't whether he won a medal. The question is, why did a man who finished dead last on every single jump become the catalyst for one of the biggest rule changes in Olympic history? To understand the sheer audacity of Eddy's leap, we have to go back to his childhood in Gloucestershire. Michael Edwards was a kid with an improbable, singular obsession: the Winter Olympics. His passion wasn't for the typical British pursuits, but for the thrill of the snow and ice. But how could a middle-class kid like Eddy become a Winter Olympian athlete? As he grew up, he became a plasterer and a part-time builder, working a grueling trade to make ends meet. He was a working-class man with a working-class dream. He wasn't born into wealth or sponsored by a major corporation. He simply saw the Olympic Games as the ultimate challenge. He began as a downhill skier, and a moderately competent one at that. He spent his early 20s skiing competitively, but the results were always the same: not good enough. He failed to qualify for the British downhill team for the 1984 Winter Olympics. The dream was slipping away, and he was nearly out of money. But Eddy was tenacious. He knew he had to compete. So he found the loophole, the crack in the foundation, the discipline of ski jumping. Eddy discovered that Britain hadn't had a ski jumper representing the country in over 60 years. The rules for sending an Olympic representative were astonishingly lax. You only needed to be a registered amateur and achieve a minimum standard in a major international event. The operative point was this: Britain had no one else to send. Eddy qualified by default. He became the first British ski jumper since 1928. Now, let's talk about the reality of the sport and the man. The sport is high speed, high stakes, and frankly, features some dangerous winter sports moments. And Eddy was perhaps the least suited man for the job. He was older, heavier than the competition, a significant disadvantage in a sport where marginal gains in aerodynamics are everything, and his equipment was a disaster. He wore 6 pairs of socks to make his boots fit. His thick-lensed prescription glasses constantly fogged up under his goggles, leaving him virtually blind as he plummeted down the ramp. His equipment was cobbled together, often borrowed from the much smaller and slightly bewildered Italian junior team. He arrived in Calgary in 1988, not just as an underdog, but as a genuine spectacle. The world watched as Michael Edwards took his jumps. On the 70-meter hill, he finished dead last. On the 90-meter jump, he finished dead last again. His jumps were short, his landings often awkward, and he looked more like a person falling than a person flying. But every single time he jumped, something incredible happened. The crowd went wild. They roared for him. They chanted his name. They saw not a contender, but a man embodying pure, unadulterated Olympic spirit. He was skiing for the love of the game, a true amateur challenging the elite. He was a man willing to face death and ridicule just to say he did it. The press went insane. One headline called him the ski jumper who doesn't fly. Another dubbed him the Eagle, a title that was more ironic than heroic. He was given a parade. He was a global sensation. In a single 2-week span, The Eddy the Eagle true story became the biggest narrative of the Games. And here is the fascinating twist of his legacy. Because he became so famous, so quickly, many people today genuinely believe he won a medal. If you ask a non-ski jumping fan about the Calgary 1988 Olympic ski jump, they are more likely to remember Eddy the Eagle Edwards than the actual gold medalist Matti from Finland, one of the greatest ski jumpers of all time. Eddy's celebrity, his Michael Edwards underdog story, completely overshadowed the man who achieved athletic perfection. Eddy was the moral champion, the winner of the public relations battle. But back in the IOC and International Ski Federation rooms, a different feeling was brewing. The elite of ski jumping, the administrators, the coaches, the powerful national federations were furious. They saw him not as a charming amateur, but as a dangerous joke, a threat to the integrity and, crucially, the funding of their sport. The world's eyes were fixed on the Eagle, but the men with the power were already drafting a solution. A secret meeting was held to deal with the Eddy problem. To understand why the world's most powerful sports body cared so much about a friendly plasterer, we have to talk about money. When a sport like ski jumping is perceived as dangerous, amateurish, and potentially farcical, corporate sponsors get nervous. Why invest millions in an event where the biggest star is the one who almost falls on his face? The official position from the International Olympic Committee was simple. They needed to protect the integrity of the Games and ensure a minimum level of competence to avoid dangerous winter sports moments. But the reality was that they needed to protect their brand and their broadcast revenue. And a man who finishes 70 meters behind the winner damages the brand of elite athleticism. So, immediately following the Calgary Games, the IOC and the International Ski Federation took swift, silent, and brutal action. They didn't just tweak a rule. They established a barrier, a wall of requirements, specifically designed to ensure that the next Eddy the Eagle would never, ever land again. The rule they created is now unofficially known throughout the sporting world as the Eddy the Eagle rule. And it was simple, yet utterly impossible for an amateur to meet. The new rule stated that an Olympic competitor must have placed in the top 30% or among the top 50 competitors in an international event. Furthermore, they must have done this multiple times in the Presti in 2 years. For someone like Eddy, who lacked funding, had no elite training, and used borrowed second-hand equipment, reaching the top 30% was completely out of the question. He didn't just need to be good. He needed to be consistently competitive with the world's most funded, professional, and elite athletes. The gate was slammed shut. Eddy tried desperately to qualify for the 1992 Games, and again for 1994 and 1998. Each time, he was blocked by the new standard, the gate slammed shut by the very people who claimed to uphold the spirit of amateur athletics. But this is not where his story ends. Because while the Olympics banned the skier, they couldn't ban the legend. After being barred from the competition, Michael Edwards' underdog story was transformed from an athlete into a cultural phenomenon. He leveraged his notoriety into a singing career, numerous endorsements, and motivational speaking gigs. The ultimate vindication of the Eagle came in 2016 with the release of the Hollywood movie Eddy the Eagle, starring Taron Egerton and Hugh Jackman. The film cemented his legacy not as a loser, but as the enduring champion of the underdog. Today, the Eddy the Eagle rule remains in effect. It has succeeded in keeping out the colorful amateurs, ensuring that every ski jumper you see is an elite professional athlete. The Games are safer, more competitive, and certainly more profitable. But when you see those flawless jumps, remember the plasterer from Cheltenham. Remember the spectacle, the borrowed equipment, the 6 pairs of socks, and the man who was too much of an amateur for the Olympic Games. Remember the Eagle who inspired a generation and changed the rules forever. Do you think the IOC was right to protect the integrity of the sport, Or did they sacrifice the true Olympic spirit for profit? Let us know in the comments below. What is your favorite famous Winter Olympic story? And if you want more cold gold stories about athletes who broke the system, follow us.